I grew up in a home that was religious. My grandparents were very active in our church. They were founding members of the church that I attended as a child. And you were at church every single Sunday. As I grew up, I was still active in the church, but I went through confirmation, and I was confirmed to the Lord. I was baptized as a baby. I spent a lot of time learning about God and trying to be a Christian, but I went through a lot of pain as a child. My parents got divorced when I was young, and then pretty much within 5 years after my parents got divorced, I lost both my grandparents. After my grandma died, I felt like I had lost my guidance because she was the one that kind of kept me. I would always think, if I do this, what will my grandma think? My sophomore year of high school, I started to run around with a bad group of people. I was in a bad relationship with a boyfriend. He was abusive. He was really controlling. He was scary sometimes. My mom didn't like him, and my grandpa didn't like him. And our relationship was bad and caused me a lot of pain. By the time I was a senior in high school, I had already started drinking. I had already been exposed to marijuana, different drugs at parties. And I was still running around with a really bad group of people and still dating the bad boyfriend. And at my senior prom, he threw a fit and tried to light the building on fire, and was escorted out of my senior prom by the police. And that relationship ended, and that messed me up. After that relationship ended, I got into another relationship almost immediately with a guy who I thought was a knight in shining armor, and I thought he was perfect. And we jumped into things really, really fast. And it turned out that he was also an abusive person. Having been through my parents' divorce, the loss of my grandparents, 2 bad boyfriends, not getting to go to college with all my friends, watching my family fall apart after my grandparents' death. When I got to college, I was really looking for an escape. That freshman year that I was in college was when I actually became addicted to drugs. And I went for 2 years, not a single day without doing drugs. I would wake up in the morning and I immediately either had to go find drugs or do drugs that I already had. My whole day centered around whether or not I was going to get sick from withdrawal, or I worried a ton about if I take too much and go to sleep while I wake up. I stole to feed my habit. I burned bridges with friends I'd had forever because of the drugs. I got a job and I ended up stealing from that job, and they caught me and I was fired, and an indictment was placed against me. And it took them about a year to actually start to prosecute me. And immediately after that happened, after they caught me and fired me, I went to rehab. God coming back into my life and getting my attention wasn't like a single moment event for me. It happened over a course of time. It was within a month I had my first court appearance for this offense that I had committed. And when I went to court, they didn't throw me in jail. I wasn't doing drugs. I passed a clean drug test, and they let me off with probation for 3 years. And so at that point, I felt like, I've been given somewhat of a chance. And one of my girlfriends called me up and said, we need to do something. We need to get out of the house and you need to live again. And that was the night that I was introduced to my now husband, Jeff. We got the shock of our lives when a few months later we found out our son was on the way. And we had no idea what we were going to do. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I was on probation. I was living with a boyfriend that I had just met. Even though I knew I loved him, I was still in shock and I had no idea where our lives were going to go. Jackson ended up being one of the only things that kept me sober for those 9 months. The day that I know that God came back into my life and I made the decision to go back to God, Pastor Mike gave a sermon about, wanting to have a personal relationship with God. And at the end of that sermon, he asked if anybody was in the congregation that didn't have a personal relationship with God and wanted one to raise their hand. And with my head down and my eyes closed and hoping that no one saw me, I raised my hand. And within a few days, I was in his office talking about God and my salvation. And the next big thing that happened in my life that stopped me from having the drug craziness was when I got baptized. The way it went down, I was still struggling with all that stuff, and I got caught. And my probation officer came to my house, and he caught me, and he had to violate me and send me to court. 2 days before that court date was the day I got baptized. And I went into the courtroom, and the judge threw the case out. And I can't explain that. And that was the moment that I knew that God was real and that he was in that courtroom, because there's no freaking way that should happen. There's just no way. There's no way. I should have gone straight to jail. And he threw the whole thing out and said, "You're done. You can go home." Does that make any sense? I firmly believe that being baptized 2 days before that washed me clean. I remember when I was very heavily involved in my addiction, I would look at people in my life, I would look at people on TV, I would look at people, just random people out in public, and I would think, how is it that they're so happy and so normal and they're not dealing with what I'm dealing with? They're not addicted to drugs, they're not going through this. How are they so happy? Because to me, my happiness was contingent upon having drugs in my system. And now I'm one of those people. Now I wake up every day and I'm happy. And I never thought that this life would come my way. To me, God is like standing right next to me all the time. I'm never without him. I wake up in the morning and I talk to him while I do my makeup. If I'm worried about something, I'll just start talking to him in the car while I'm driving. I'm constantly recognizing things that God is doing, how he's set things up in my life to work out a certain way, one way or the other. And I'm still, even to this day, going back through my story of how I got here and recognizing little things that he had planted in my life that were steering me towards him. People hate the term recovered addict. They like recovering because it's a process. And if you're just doing AA and you're just doing a sobriety partner and you're white knuckling it the way I was, yeah, you'll be recovering forever. But I asked God to take it away from me and I am recovered. I don't have to say I'm recovering anymore because it's not coming back. If I could say one thing to someone who doesn't know Christ, I would tell them that he loves you and that whatever it is you're going through is part of his plan for you. And as hopeless and scary and hurtful as it might seem, it's all a part of his plan. And if you just ask him, if you just want to know him, everything will change. It might seem like there's no way out. It might seem like there's no hope. But if you ask God, I promise you He'll come into your life.